Welcome. Welcome to TK's Mother Mary Carter Smith annual celebration. Before I continue, may I get permission from my elders to continue?
Yes, Rosalind. Yes, Rosalind, you have my permission.
Thank you. Again, welcome. Peace and blessings to you. I'm Rosalind Campbell, Tradition Keepers co-president, Tradition Keepers, Black Storytellers of Western New York. I do welcome you. We thank you for joining us for the celebration for Mother Mary Carter Smith. But before we start the celebration, I would like to take a few minutes and briefly tell you some things about TK. Tradition Keepers came into existence in 1995. The founding members are Karima Amin and Sharon Holly. We're committed to promoting, preserving, and perpetuating storytelling in the African traditions. You know, storytelling is the art of tradition of passing on folk tales, family history, ghost stories, etc., from one generation to the next. TK is also an affiliate of NABS, National Association of Black Storytellers. So now I ask you to join Tradition Keepers as we celebrate the life of Mother Mary Carter Smith. Mother Mary was born in 1919. She's known nationwide for reviving and promoting storytelling as a form of communication and a teaching method. So let's listen to TK's co-founder and historian, Karima Amin, as she imparts knowledge and entertain us through the art of storytelling.
I really feel good about having the opportunity to share this story. I first met Mother Mary in Toronto. I had gone there for the Toronto Storytelling Festival put on by the Storytelling School of Toronto. I had met her in New York. She'd come to Art Park a couple of times, but this was an opportunity to spend a whole weekend with storytellers and to spend a lot of time with her. She was a God-fearing woman. She was a God-loving woman. And one thing she sometimes did when she told a story was to begin with a biblical reference. First time she did it, I thought she was going to tell a Bible story, but she didn't tell a Bible story. She told a folk tale. And next time she did it, I thought she was going to tell a Bible story, but nope, she told a scary story. But anyway, she did make biblical references. And the story I'm going to share is a story I heard her tell a couple of times about dead Aaron Kelly. And she would begin that story talking about Ezekiel, the prophet Ezekiel from the Bible. And chapter 37, which is where God sets Ezekiel down in the valley of the dry bones. And there Ezekiel is able to witness God's ability to rejuvenate, to restore life, to resurrect. The story I'm going to tell is about dead Aaron Kelly, and it begins like this. Aaron Kelly was dead. That's right, Aaron Kelly was dead. He died. We put him in a coffin and we buried him. And later that evening, some family, folks, and friends went to dead Aaron's house to sit with the widow so she wouldn't be lonely. And while we were sitting there talking about dead Aaron, sitting there in front of the fireplace, talking about dead Aaron being a good man, a proud man, a strong man, a good friend, a wonderful person, sometimes a funny man, sometimes a jealous man, but a good man overall, a good neighbor and a good friend. And I know you're not going to believe this, but then dead Aaron walked through the front door. Yes, he did. Dead Aaron walked through the front door and sat down in his favorite chair, a rocking chair, right in front of the fireplace. Now, we looked at him and he wasn't nothing but bones, but we knew it was dead Aaron because he walked like dead Aaron and he stood tall and straight. That was definitely dead Aaron. And then he sat in that rocking chair like he always did, rocking back and forth and back and back and forth and creak and crack and creak and crack. Oh, yeah, just like he always did. But after a while, he said to everybody, "What's wrong with y'all? Y'all sitting here looking like somebody died." And the widow said, "Aaron, somebody did die." And Aaron said, "Who died?" And the widow said, "Aaron, you died." And Aaron said, "I don't feel dead, so I won't be dead. I'm not going back to that grave." The widow said, "Aaron, you don't look fine." He said, "But I feel fine, so I'm not going back to that grave." And he sat in that chair, just rocking to and fro, back and forth, creaking, cracking. And finally, Aaron said, "You know what? I feel like it should be more jolly in here. Anybody got an instrument? Somebody got a guitar? Anybody got a harmonica? Anybody got a fiddle?" Well, it was true that a fiddler was sitting right next to the widow. He had come and brought his instrument because now that Aaron was dead, he was hoping to have a word with the widow, and maybe one day soon he might marry her. The fiddler said, I got my instrument. And he took it out and he began to play a jolly tune, a jolly tune. And Aaron's big bald head started wagging. Oh, yeah. He liked that jolly tune. And some of the folks sitting there started tapping their toes, and a few of them was patting their thighs, and a couple of them was clapping their hands, and dead Aaron was loving it. Finally, dead Aaron said, "Let's dance." Nobody moved, but Aaron did. He jumped up. I mean, really, he jumped up, and next thing you know, he was jumping and twirling and skipping and hopping. He was all over that room, dancing up and down, back and forth, round and round, hippity hop. Oh, that Aaron was having a good time. He was having a wonderful time. Yes, he was. It was great. He danced himself around the room. He danced himself. You should have seen him twirl. He danced himself around the room. You should have seen him jump. He danced himself around the room. You should have seen him skip. And after a while, something happened. You see, his joints was dry and his back was stiff. And one of those dry bones popped off. And when it hit the wood floor, the widow said, "Woo-wee, did you see that? Play faster." And the fiddler played faster. She said, "Play louder." And the fiddler played louder, faster, louder, faster, and louder. People was tapping their toes, clapping their hands, patting their thighs, and old dead Aaron danced and twirled and danced and twirled. And after a while, some more bones popped off, clap, clap. They hit the wood floor, and the next thing you knew, dead Aaron had collapsed. He collapsed right there in a pile of bones. There was nothing left moving except his big bone bald head. And that big bone bald head just kind of bounced around, grinning at everybody. It just kind of bounced around and kind of rolled around, and finally it stopped. And when it did, the folks gathered up the bones, put them back in the coffin, and they put the bones in all crisscross so Aaron couldn't get the bones back together again. And they took them out back and they put him in a hole and they buried him. And that's the story of dead Aaron Kelly. I know it's a silly story and it's a real short story. And you know what? When the fiddler said, "I can't take this," he said, "I'm going home." And he did. And well, he never came back. Nope. And the widow never married. Nope. Well, I guess Aaron was a jealous man, like they said. He made sure that the widow never married. And that's the story of dead Aaron Kelly. Yeah, didn't tell it as good as Mother Mary, but I did what I could. It's a story I really, really like, and I loved hearing her tell it because she would dance around, jump around, dance, just like dead air. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Karima, my mentor. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mother,
Rosalind.
thank you. Mother Mary cultivated creative awareness through storytelling. She also promoted humanity. If you haven't read her works, just look around and you'll see. She'll inspire you with her prose and great poetry. Studying this woman of God has truly motivated me. Now, TK's poetic sister, Angela Woodson Bryce, will enlighten us with her poem on Mother Mary Carter Smith. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Rosalind. I ask the ancestors for permission to speak.
You have my permission.
Thank you, Karima. My poem is entitled Praise, Honor, Nurture, Mother Mary Carter Smith. Mother Mary Carter Smith's life was filled with many stormy times. So often she witnessed death through sickness and senseless crimes. She sang, "We'll stand the storm and it won't be long. We'll anchor by and by. We'll stand the storms and it won't be long. We'll anchor by and by." Mary Rogers Ward was born February 10th, 1919, and became Mother Mary Carter Smith, our griot queen. With no father present, she was raised by maternal kin, her mother Eartha and grandma Mary, strong Black women. A stepdad entered her life when Mary was 4. Tragically, tuberculosis came knocking at their door. Only 1 year after her mother had wed, sadly, poor stepdad succumbed and was dead. Her mother did marry a 3rd time to a man who committed a horrible crime. After being married less than a year, his gunshot killed Mary's mother dear. Then Mary and her grandma traveled to Ohio. When summoned by an uncle, they decided to go. Mary excelled as a student, an avid reader too, telling her grandma stories we assumed were true. Off to West Virginia, a life there they try. 2 years later, beloved grandma would die. An anti-union mob ran the family out of town. Blindness nearly took one of her aunties down. Off to Baltimore, the family did steal away. Treatment there helped auntie's sight to stay. In school, Mary joined clubs for drama and speech. Then Copeland College prepared her to educate and teach. Mary taught school and worked at the library. Ulysses Carter eventually made her his wifey. Coleman Carter became her new surname. Some years later, her son Ricardo came. In less than 5 years, Mary sought divorce. By then, she developed an African American course, collected stories, poems, songs. She was never into glitz. She wore simple African jewelry to adorn dashiki outfits. A second marriage to a friend from her earlier life. He was Elias Smith, who had previously lost his wife. Mary taught, supported youths, and published poetry. Lost her beloved husband due to his failed kidneys. Books entitled Town Child, Laugh a Little, Cry a Lot, A Trip to Ghana in 1969, and a career as a paid griot. A hosting gig on a Baltimore public TV show, meeting Alex Haley, who did wisely know that she was a griot, a new and interesting name. His American griot, she gladly became. On the radio with Griot for the Young and Young at Heart, her role of storytelling grew into a popular form of art. Then tragedy struck with the stabbing death of her son, but Mary's momentum was not to be undone. She became an activist, fighting to pave the way to a Martin Luther King commemorative holiday. The National Association of Black Storytellers was her aim, with the tireless assistance of Linda Goss. NABS became an organization to perpetuate the stories of those long dead, embodying history and heritage of the African ancestral thread. Depict, document, educate with dance, song, and drum we entertain, allowing folklore, legends, fables, and myths to be maintained. Immortalized in wax and inducted in the Maryland Hall of Fame, Mother Mary was a pioneer we should all strive for the same, to empower our youth as a new griot generation, tell of African lives and those enslaved on plantations. African stories, songs, and poems, oral history galore. African heritage is far too valuable for descendants to ignore. Let Mother Mary be a bright beacon to honor and love as she inspires us from her heavenly perch above. Let us cherish her legacy and the many trails she has blazed as we empower our youth to honor, to nurture, to praise. We love you, Mary, Mother Mary. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. That was nice. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let Mother Mary be a bright beacon to honor, love, and love as she inspires us from above. Let us cherish her legacy and the many trails she's blazed as we empower our youth, as Angela said, to honor, nurture, and praise. I must admit, my knowledge of Mother Mary was limited at best. However, watching her interviews and listening to her stories increased my desire to learn more about this phenomenal woman. Now, Sharon Holly, TK's co-founder and business owner, will share her personal story and sweet memories of Mother Mary Carter Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ah, you should have met her if you didn't. It was about 1984, 1985 when I met her. She was approximately, I'd say about 5 feet 2 inches, expression of African essence with a mesmerizing voice and a commanding presence. Now, I can't exactly remember the first time I saw her, but the early part, he was a featured storyteller at Art Park. Yeah, Art Park up in Lewiston, New York. That's when they had a storytelling place in the woods where we could come up and sit on a log and have the sun shine down through the trees as we listened to different storytellers that they had brought to Art Park. I remember her signature story, Cindy Ellie. You have to hear it. Because after you hear Cindy Ellie, Cinderella will not be the same anymore. She told us, Karima and me, about the third festival of ABS, it was called then, the Association of Black Storytellers. Before NABS, it was ABS. And she told us that this festival was going to be held in Washington, D.C. in November 1985. And she invited us to come. And we came. Well, we stayed at the Howard Inn, which was right across the street from Howard University. And we saw and heard many tellers. We ate a lot of McDonald's that weekend too, but that's another story. We stayed at the Howard Inn across from Howard University, and we heard Linda Goss tell stories. Maxine Legal, she was one of the forerunners of the association. Ayuba Kamau, who played the drums and told a lot of stories. There were puppeteers, there were tap dancers, you name it. I think everybody in the Washington, D.C. area had been invited to be a part of this. On that Sunday, which was like the spiritual storytelling concert, we didn't have it at Howard University. We all went to St. Augustine Church in the center of Washington, D.C. And there, Mama Mary told the story of Mose Tunyu, the smoke that thunders. It was a wonderful story that I remember. And what I remember most at the end of that story with her voice, she sang, I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. And if you read that story, it's about war. And that was a very good introduction to that. So meeting her in Washington, D.C. was the beginning of a close relationship where not only her stories, but her faith was front and center of her life. Reflecting on the murder of her mother and then later in life, her only son, Ricky, she was one who prayed for forgiveness and filled her heart with love. She forgave the woman who stabbed her son, where she met her in prison, where she was going to tell stories and work with those who were incarcerated. She was also one who was a praying woman, and she often held a prayer line on the phone for board members when I was a part of the early board member. And always in her room, you could come and there was a place for prayer. There was a prayer space in her room. Because Mama Mary believed that without prayer, these festivals were not going to happen. She handed out tracts to people who, unbeknown to them, thought they were little pamphlets on Black liberation because they were red, black, and green until you got it and you saw that it was a religious tract where she professed her love for Jesus Christ and her love for Christianity. Now, she was a praying woman, she was a loving woman, but I have to tell you, don't cross her. She would cuss you out in a minute. And she knew a lot of words that had come from West Virginia and Ohio. And she knew how to string them together to make you feel real bad about what you had said as well. Every Christmas, we got a Christmas card from Mama Mary. Sometimes it included her poems, sometimes it might include a story. Sometimes she would talk about how she was praying for all of us, but all of her cards kind of ended with the testimony with John 13, chapter 13, verse 35. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples if you have love one to another. That was her quoted verse. It often appeared in her letters. It often appeared in her books. I just have to say, I wish you could have met her. There was no one in NABS like Mama Mary Carter Smith.
Thank you, my mentor. Yes, as you can tell, everyone, all of the tellers are my mentor. I just appreciate that. Mother Mary's extensive collection of stories, poems, and dramatic sketches was developed through a recollection of experiences from her native Alabama roots. Her experiences as a teacher, librarian, and activist, as well as extensive traveling, also enriched her stories. Now, TK's sister Sandra William Bush, genealogist and retired librarian, will enlighten us with the wisdom of storytelling.
Let me tell you a story about a certain village in Ghana and its people. In this village, people were supported by two different occupations, either fishermen or farmers. Now, according to the elders, it was taboo for fishermen to fish on Tuesdays and for farmers to farm on Fridays. And you know, if the elders said it, who's going to question them? Now, of course, since farming was one of the major occupations, the rainy season was very important. You see, if it rained too hard or if it didn't rain enough, then the crops would suffer and therefore the people would suffer. But in this village, everybody was very connected. The women The older women were called mother, the men were called father, the young women were called auntie, and the young men were called uncle. There were no orphans, there were no homeless people. Everybody took care of everybody. There was always food to be shared, and there was always shelter for everyone. Now, I tell you this because on one fine Tuesday, a fisherman got up early and he decided he was going to go inland to visit his family, the farmers. And as he walked, he noticed that the terrain was changing. It was becoming more grassy and the flowers were different. And he breathed in, and even the air was different. And he walked on and he got to his family's home. Of course, they weren't there because they were farmers. They were out tending the field. Now, they had pulled up some crops, and these crops were hanging outside of the storehouse. Whether you were a farmer or a fisherman, there was only two ways to preserve food because there was no refrigeration. You either dried the food or smoked the food. And when the fisherman came to his family's home, he noticed out by the storehouse there were crops hanging to dry. Now, this drying process took a while and it had to be closely monitored. The fisherman sat outside waiting for his family. And as he did, it started to rain. He kind of pulled up his collar and he scrunched up and he looked up at the sky and he could tell that it was going to rain even harder, and it did. So he went inside and he waited for his family. Eventually they did come because it was time for their midday meal. And when they came, they were surprised to see him, but as I said, everybody shared everything. So they were ready to invite him to the meal too. And one asked, well, did you notice the crops were hanging outside the storehouse drying? Did you bring them in when it started to rain? And he had the nerve to pull up. I'm a fisherman, not a farmer. Okay, my brother, hold on to that thought. And the family sat down to eat their midday meal. And they didn't invite him, as was the custom. Wait a minute. He jumped up and he started to storm out. The matriarch called him back. She said to him, now when you go home and you tell the story, make sure you tell the whole story. Don't just tell one part of the story. Tell the whole story on why we didn't invite you to sit down at our meal as is our custom. He had to admit he was wrong. And from that day forward, the God people were known for their saying, make sure to tell the whole story. Now, as I look for stories to tell for this program, this one touched me, especially the moral. Make sure you tell the whole story, because Mother Mary was an avid student of Black history, and she was avidly believed in the power of Black storytelling. Because as we all know, through our own personal education, the whole story has not been told. And Mother Mary and Mama Linda formed the National Association of Black Storytellers with the charge two storytellers to tell the whole story. Ashe.
Ashe. Thank you, Sister Sandra. I like that. Thank you. Thank you. Inspired by the emergence of Black cultural expressions of the 1960s and by her concern over misunderstanding among groups, Mother Mary dedicated her life to peace and humanity, as she explains in her statement of purpose. Misunderstanding abounds. It has no resting place. Rich, poor, majority, minority, young, old, Black, and white all feel the sting of being misunderstood. And there are many people using many ways trying to lead us to a better understanding of each other. I am among those who fight misunderstanding. The weapon I use are stories, dance, drama, and laughter. I bring entertainment with a purpose. Let's continue our journey and enjoy a beautiful performance by TK's creative drummer and Zumba instructor, Denise Chapman Acosta, as she intrigues us with her praise, energy, and love of storytelling through the art of storytelling and dance. Thank you, Denise.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh,
Oh, that was so wonderful. I wish I had my tambourine. That was wonderful. Yes, yes. Well, now, TK, at the end of our monthly meetings with an original Tradition Keepers chant, we end each of our meetings, which is to reiterate the elements of our mission statement. We use our stories to praise the Creator and the creativity of our people. We use our stories to honor our ancestors. We use our stories to nurture the present and future generations. Now, TK's humanitarian, Marlon Williams, will share TK's chant.
We are tradition keepers, Black storytellers of Western New York. We are tradition keepers, Black storytellers of Western New York. We are tradition keepers, Black storytellers of Western New York. We praise tradition keepers, Black storytellers of Western New York. We honor tradition keepers, Black storytellers of Western New York. We nurture tradition keepers, Black storytellers of Western New York. We praise, we honor, and we nurture. Shante.
This concludes the Tradition Keepers celebration of the life of Mother Mary Carter Smith, the co-founder of the National Association of Black Storytellers, AKA NABS. We hope you were inspired, informed, and entertained. Karima tugged at our heartstrings and enriched our souls with the story of Erin Kelly. It was my privilege to give an in-depth bio in poetic form of this amazing woman's life and legacy. Sharon so vividly conveyed her memories of Mother Mary, her testimonies, and her forgiving nature. Sandra enlightened us with the story of the farmer and the fisherman, and making sure you tell the whole story. Denise took us to a new spiritual height with her intricate dance, Oh Freedom. Marlon chanted the purpose of the Tradition Keepers to praise, honor, and nurture. Thank you to all. Thank you to our narrator, can't forget our narrator, Rosalind, who so eloquently connected each performance to our theme. And last but not least, we thank our technical team of Patricia, Denise, and Joy. Where would we be without you all? Thank you, ladies, for sharing your treasured gifts with us tonight. If you are interested in storytelling, please contact Tradition Keepers, Black Storytellers of Western New York, on our Facebook page. And if you're interested in learning more about the National Association of Black Storytellers, AKA NABS, we encourage you to visit their website. We truly appreciate your participation and donations, and we ask that you continue to support TK's and NABS events. Information about donations can be found in the chat. Lastly, I'd like to say, Mother Mary Carter Smith's foray into storytelling began when she was only 5 years old, mourning the tragic death of her 22-year-old mother. She sang, "If you love your mother, meet her in the sky. We love you, Mother Mary, and we will one day meet you in the sky."